What's up guys, Ryan here at Signature Edits, and inside of this Lightroom tutorial we're going to take a look at these raw files right here. And the best part, they're this week's free raw photos over at signatureedits.com. So you can head to signatureedits.com, you're going to download these files and you can edit along with me. So go ahead, head over there, let's hit that intro, grab yourself a snack, some popcorn, some teriyaki jerky, I don't care, maybe some sushimi if you're feeling really fancy and cultured. Let's hit that intro and we'll get right into it. All right, so I've got the files here. If you haven't downloaded them yet, you can pause the video, head over to signatureedits.com/free raw photos. Okay, once you've got those, or if you're just enjoying along with your sushimi, you can watch me listen to the sounds of my melodic voice and we'll edit these photos together, starting with this awesome photo of a giraffe. Well named, Gabriel, by I'm So Gabriel Studios. Thank you for uploading this file. By the way, if you like these videos and you want to keep them coming, feel free to upload your photos at the signatureedits.com/free raw files page. There's a link there where you can actually upload your own work and get it shared and just kind of pay it forward. Okay, all that said, let's start editing. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I'm loving the shot, but it's kind of a little just flat looking, I'm going to head over to the profile section. I'm going to browse these profiles. Now, if you're in Lightroom CC and not CC Classic, you might not have this section. I can't remember if the latest update does have it. If it doesn't, no big deal. Don't worry about it. If it does, great. You can try these different profiles and you're going to see that there's the camera matching ones. These are actually what your native camera had inside of it. So if you set your camera to profile landscape or neutral or portrait, that will let you recreate that exact color here by selecting the profile inside of Lightroom. Or you can use Adobe's different profiles. I find generally the camera profile often works better. Or, of course, if you happen to have some Signature Edits presets or any other preset pack with custom profiles, you can grab one of those. And the beauty of these particular profiles is that they actually have an amount slider on them. So you can adjust how much of that profile you want to adjust your image. Okay, so let's go back here to the camera profiles and grab Vivid together. Good. Next, I'm going to desaturate these greens in the background. Now, the real thing I want you to think about when you're editing these photos is trying to decide what you want to bring out in the photo and what you want to minimize. You got to think about it like any art or design project. It's about working with the cohesiveness of the colors, kind of thinking to yourself, okay, what elements do I want to draw out of this and what do I want to kind of make a little bit more muted? So in this case, I'm going to desaturate the yellows. I'm going to desaturate the greens, and then I'm going to add some saturation back into these oranges and to the reds. Now here's before and here's after. So you see how by doing that, we're actually just making the giraffe pop more off of the screen. Now another option we could do is go over to the hue, and instead of having the yellows and the greens be really green, we could shift them towards more of a red and towards more of a yellow, and then take some of the saturation back up in here. And you'll see that we've just kind of made the colors overall a little bit more cohesive. They're working together now. Instead of being really contrasting colors, they're kind of all in the same family. They're all nice and warm. So next step here, I'm going to adjust my exposure a little bit, make it slightly brighter. And then I'm going to grab a radial filter, put that on Mr. Giraffe, reset my settings, and I'm just going to take the contrast up a little bit, exposure down a little bit, and I'm just going to make this giraffe pop by making the background a little bit less clear, maybe even a little bit of dehaze. And we could add some saturation or take away some and just see how it feels. So it really depends what you're trying to go for, obviously. Whether you want to keep it more natural or you want it to look super edited, it's up to you. This is just my kind of take on it, and I would love to see yours. Tag your finished photo at Signature Edits Co. So you can actually take these files and upload them on your own Instagram. Just don't take credit for them as if you took the picture, but you can make it clear you edited them, and it's kind of fun to be able to share. Okay, so I'm going down to the camera calibration panel, and I'm just playing around here. This photo, I am just seeing what's possible. Let's try taking the saturation of the greens down and the reds up. And then a little bit more in the blues. Something like that. So we've got a really poppin' image now at this point. Here's before, here's after. And if you want to, we can add more of like a kind of filmic feel. I'm going to do that by going to our trusty tone curve. I'm going to take our black point, which is over here on the far left, and drag that up a little bit, just like that. So now the darkest part of the image is no longer black, it's just a really dark gray. And that's going to give it kind of more of a vintage feel. Then I'm going to grab the white point of the image and do the same thing. So we're going to grab it. You're going to see if you watch this part of the giraffe here, the spot that was previously white is now more of a really, really bright gray. And then we can take this point and take it down even a little bit further, and you're going to see things get a lot more creamy as opposed to super high contrast. Here's before and here's after. So it all depends what you're going for. It depends what you like. But oftentimes, if you're going for that kind of bright and airy look, what you'll do is you'll intentionally overexpose it, and then you'll roll the highlights back like that, and it kind of gives you this really creamy effect. You see? Okay, so I'm thinking that we're looking kind of interesting. We could keep tweaking all day. There's a million things we could do, but let's move on. There's no specific, this is the perfect way to edit these photos. We're just kind of having fun today and exploring some different options. So this next one, I'm just going to grab a preset and it's done. Just kidding. We're not going to use any presets. I'm going to go back over here and let's try just adjusting our white balance to start. First step in any photo generally is you want to get your white balance and your exposure dialed in. So this one by default was just too warm for me. So I'm going to reset it, cool it down. Then I'm going to play with our tint, make it a little bit more magenta. Okay, that's looking not bad. Now I really want to take the focus of this entire image and place it onto our lion's face. So how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to start by just working with the light. Your eyes are naturally drawn to the brightest part of the image, so we're going to grab that radial filter that we created earlier, taking down the clarity a little bit, and the texture down a little bit, the exposure and the contrast. And you'll see it's kind of like a spotlight we can move around. So we're going to put it on our line right here. And I'm actually going to take the contrast up instead of down because I want it to really focus in on Mr. Lion right there. Just like that. Okay, that's looking not too bad. I'm going to go down to our HSL now. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing as our last photo. We're going to grab our greens and desaturate them. Grab the yellows, desaturate them a little bit. And take the hue of the yellows and maybe just see what we can get away with. We don't want to mess with our lion's mane and colors too much. Something like that. Okay, so here's before and here's after. Pretty basic, but we're making some progress. Next, I'm going to want to enhance the detail of Mr. Lion's face. So we're going to grab a brush, not be super careful here, reset it. And just to save some time, I'm going to go over here. I've got a preset called Add Texture. It's just adding some contrast, raising the highlights, lowering the shadows, clarity up a little bit. We're going to add even a little bit more texture. We could go crazy, depends what you like. I find less is definitely more. The longer I am editing photos, I'm just finding I look at photos that I edited way back when and I'm really disappointed I can't use them anymore because they look way over edited. So now I try to do less of that. Okay, so that just brought out the detail a little bit in our lion's face. And now I think I want to actually add some saturation and some color to the background. So there's a couple ways that we could do this. We could do it by making a range mask. So I'm going to grab a radial filter. Here's a little trick. You can make a tiny little radial filter off of the screen. Why are we doing that? Well, because now if we press O and see our mask, that selection is covering the entire image. So now we can kind of add an overlay to our image. And you'll see it actually kind of looks cool just like that. We've kind of darkened everything down. We've added some contrast. We've made it a little bit more creamy. Now we can selectively go through here and just erase the sections where we don't want that effect to be applied as strongly. So if you hold down Alt, once you select the brush tool, you can then click and erase off the parts of the image that you want to keep nice and bright. So in this case, it's going to be Mr. Lion's face. His little ears, maybe his mane. Right? And you can go through and really creatively do this too. So you could find just the areas that you really want to enhance. Kind of like if you're doing makeup, you're contouring. So I'm just erasing this filter off of the brighter parts of the image. And that's going to add contrast really selectively in a controlled way rather than just adding it to everything in a blanket way. And I've got the auto mask feature on right now, and that's helping get a more accurate mask with this hair, hopefully. Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes auto mask works, and other times you'll see it's just doing a lousy job. So hit or miss. But hopefully you can see how that kind of adds an interesting effect. Now, this particular effect setting, pretty strong, pretty intense. So what we could do is just dial it back and kind of meet it in the middle. So I'll grab the clarity, bring that back up a little bit, take all these settings back just a little bit. Something like that right there. So here's before and here's after. That's where we've come so far. Now, I'm noticing that the lens corrections are on with this image, and I'm not really liking what it's doing, so I'm just going to turn that off. That's the thing about Lightroom and editing photos. Like, there are techniques to doing it well, but sometimes doing it correctly isn't going to give you the best result. Sometimes it's just about following your instinct and following your eyes. Okay, these little, I don't know what they are, but they're distracting, so I'm going to get rid of them using the spot removal tool. Good. And then I really want to enhance the eyes right here so that they're just a little bit more bright. So let's zoom in. And again, I'm not being super picky because I'm not going to do a super intense effect. Press O if you want to see your mask. I'm going to reset this by holding Alt, click Reset. And now I do have an iris brightener that I could select like that. And basically we're just going to brighten those eyes up. Maybe add some texture. Now the thing with eyes is that when you're zoomed in like this, it might look fine. And it's like, yeah, that's great, I'm a genius. Then you zoom out, maybe it still looks fine, or maybe it looks weird. But when you really zoom out is when you notice whether the eyes are way too bright. So you can see, like, if you zoom out and the photo's really small and the eyes are just like, woo, 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 then you know you should do something. So I'm going to dial it back just a bit. I think it's not bad, but we don't want to push it too far. Good. And I feel like his little kitty nose would probably benefit from the same. And then his little kitty lips. So it's really about just adding detail selectively on the parts of the image that are really going to benefit from it. So I think his ears here maybe. That's definitely way too much, so we'll just undo that. We're going to do the same thing, but we'll just turn our flow down. So we're adding a little bit to the ears, but not too much. It's just like painting. Little by little, tiny little improvements are what make a great image. Not trying to do it all with one slider. That's where things start to go crazy. And also applying the effects really locally. Doing a lot of really small adjustments, not to the entire image at once. Those blanket adjustments aren't going to get you the effect you're after. So here's before and here's after. If you like it, great. If you don't, great. Make something more awesome and show it to me by tagging @signatureeditsco. So we are going to try and brighten up a couple of areas now that I'm noticing. Just comparing with the before and after, it can be helpful sometimes to reset your eyes and be like, oh, yeah, that actually looks ridiculous. So let's go back to our radial filter. We're going to toggle to our eraser now, turn my flow down just a bit. Hold down Alt, that's going to open up our eraser. I'm going to erase just a little bit more off here. Do I like that more? I don't even know. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to go down to the color grading panel. Yours might say split toning depending on what version of Lightroom you have. And I'm just going to take the shadows and maybe add some. Oh, it looks like the shadows are affecting everything. That's nice. Okay, well, I sort of like that greenish yellow. Highlights, we could do something similar, but more of like a reddy greenish yellow. And then the midtones probably we're not going to touch, but let's just see. Yeah, okay. Why not? Here's before, here's after. I don't even know if I like it better after. We're going to leave it like that. Move on. Please share your version of this photo. I would love to see what you come up with. And by the way, if this video has been helpful, can you do me a big favor? Can you leave a comment below? And also make sure to hit that like button. It just helps me out. So if this has been helpful for you, I would appreciate it. All right, so this one, nice portrait we got here by Elton Botel Photos. Make sure to check him out. Let's grab our white balance here. Take it down just like that. So you're going to see what a massive difference in the skin tone, right? Just by adjusting the white balance. So if your white balance is not right, your skin tones might feel funny. If you're like, why don't my skin tones look good? Probably your white balance. Then we're going to just dial this in a little bit more. Now, we could go up to our profiles, experiment with some different ones, see what's up here. Maybe go to a portrait setting. See what feels right. Of course, I like the signature edits ones, but I'm going to be a little bit non-objective. Okay, so we've got our basic settings for white balance right. Now I'm going to add a radial filter. And we're just going to darken down the background around her. Switch to brush and press O to see your overlay. And then just erase that filter off of our subject. Now, since it's a pretty subtle effect, I'm not going to worry too much about getting it absolutely perfect. Somewhere around there. So here's before, and here's after. That was not helpful. Before, after. I'm going to dial it back because that looks a little bit too intense. Something like that. And sometimes what's nice, you can take the contrast way up on this because it's basically a background layer at this point. And then you can take the contrast down in your overall image and just get some softer tones on the skin. Sometimes, or sometimes not. You got to feel it out. All right, now I still don't really love the tone of her skin, so let's try and fix that a little bit more in the hue panel. Normally skin is in the oranges and the yellows, so we're going to take it a little bit more towards red. And the yellows we'll take towards red a little bit too, but we'll also desaturate them. You're seeing a trend here. I'm a big fan of desaturating the yellows. Okay, now what do I like about this image? What don't I like? Well, let's talk about color. We've got this weird kind of red going on in the hayfield or whatever this is. And we've got green, we've got blue, we've got some purple in the background. Basically, we've got a whole bunch of colors and none of them are really working well together. So addition by subtraction, that is sometimes the best method. So we're going to start by just taking all the color out of this image, except for the skin tones. Then we're just going to add things back one at a time and roll with it from there. Okay, let's try adding some green because I think her jacket was kind of green. And then the yellows, probably sit them somewhere around there. Now the blues, it looks weird having a sky totally desaturated, but we could also play with the hue of the blues to see if we can get a hue that works a little bit better. Honestly, not a big fan of that. So what we might do is just do an overlay and we'll do it in the color grading rather than trying to get the colors naturally looking the way we want. So leave it there for now. Here's before, here's after. So we're making some progress. Let's head down to our camera calibration and we can just sort of mess around, see if our colors can be fixed down here. Just going to desaturate and you're going to see how much nicer the skin looks. Here's before and here's after. Just by taking the saturation down. Now what's the difference between doing that in the camera calibration and doing it in the HSL panel? Well, let me show you. Here's calibration version, does that. Then we'll shut this off. Try doing the same thing in the reds of our hue saturation. You're going to see it's much more localized because the hue saturation luminance panel is going to affect the reds in the image, whereas the calibration panel, this is going to sound kind of weird, but it's actually the reds in every pixel across the entire image. Whether that pixel is this one or this one or this one or this one, each has a red value assigned to it, and that's what we're affecting down here. Fun fact. So if you want to understand more about that HSL panel, you can always check that out in the other video that I have on the channel. Okay, so I'm liking the way that she's looking overall. I'm not hating it anymore. I think that we've come a long way in terms of skin tone. But the overall image feels kind of washed out, kind of boring. There's just not much going on that I like. So let's try going back to our radial filter. Hit O, you can see that basically it's not affecting her too much. Maybe we'll come over here again and just clean it up a little bit. Okay, now it's basically just treating the background. So what we could do, we could grab a color overlay and just warm the whole thing up by adding some like orangey yellow. And that's going to kind of help to counteract that really blue, weird sky we got going on. Then I'm going to take the saturation down a little bit. somewhere around there. Maybe even warm it up. Just sort of see what feels right. Somewhere around there. Okay, it's not finished yet. Don't worry. And we're going to grab our temperature. We can maybe warm it up a little bit and go down to our color grading panel. And here's where we're hoping we're going to be able to fix this by grading it so that it just feels a little bit more cohesive. The colors are still working against each other. We want to kind of make them blend a little bit more. So we're going to add some warmth, maybe add some green to the shadows because her jacket's already green. Or we could go the opposite way. Add some red to the shadows, see how that feels. I'm thinking that's not bad. Not loving it, but not bad. And then we can just play around with these different colors. See what happens when we take the blue out all the way or add it back in a little bit. Here's before color grading. Here's after. Might have added a little bit too much, so dial it back a bit. So that's my take on this image. Here's before, here's after. Now, there's a million other things that we could do, and I look forward to seeing what you come up with yourself. We're just going to add a little bit more pop here in our tone curve. Before, after. I'm going to say, for now, that's fine. Let's move on. We got other stuff to do. Do you have different ideas? Please let me know in the comments below. Okay, so this one, let's just take a look here. You can see we've got an image taken of a nice starry night. The only thing is it looks like it was taken with maybe just a slightly smaller sensor photo because our stars here are not super clean. If we look at our ISO, it was set to 6400 at 25 seconds. So for whatever reason, this camera didn't go probably above 25 seconds, and so they had to do that in order to get the stars in this shot. But it winds up giving us a really low latitude image, and it's just going to be really hard to make it look super awesome. So I'm not going to worry too much about rescuing it simply because the easiest method here would honestly be to take it into Photoshop and replace the sky. So I could show you how to do that maybe in another tutorial. You can let me know if you're interested in that. But I'm just going to add, I'll show you how I'd normally do a blue sky photo. Something like that. And then I'm going to try and separate using a range mask to just work on this bottom section here. So what I'm going to do, I'm brushing across everything, make sure my flow is turned all the way up. And then I'm going to go down to range mask, luminance, and I'm just going to target the darkest parts of the image. So we're going to grab the range, and you see as I grab that slider, it's now only focused in on the black parts of the image. Perfect. Press O again. I can reset my settings, and then you can take the exposure up. Of course, it's not going to work so well with this particular image because it's pretty grainy, but that's kind of how I would go about doing it. Focus on taking the highlights and the whites up, take the shadows down, and then that's just going to help counteract the extra noise. So here's before, here's after. Yeah, we got a little bit more detail out of it. And then for the sky, if you want to add more saturation and blueness to the sky, yes, blueness, that's a word. I just made it up. A couple ways to do that. Obviously, you can do a color overlay. We can make it whatever beautiful color we want. Let's add a little bit of teal maybe. I don't know. You can also grab the white balance and add more blue to your image or take it away. Right up there. Super quick and easy. Then we could add some texture, maybe drop the shadows a little bit. That'll make the stars pop and kind of counteract the noise a little bit. Take our noise slider up and that'll clean it up slightly. I don't know. That's kind of a start. You can show me what you come up with. I'd love to see it. Tag @SignatureEditsCo. I am honestly not a huge astrophotographer, so I'm not going to claim that I'm an awesome editor of these kind of photos. But the main thing is start with a cleaner image. That's going to be the biggest kind of thing you got to figure out. Lastly, let's just clean up this orange section. So we're going to do the same thing. Head over to a range mask, luminance, and just target the brightest parts of the image. And that should mask out just that orange section. Good. There's a couple things we could do. We could make it even more orange. I'm thinking I just sort of want to roll it back. Take the highlights down just to blend it in a little bit better. Take the clarity down. Maybe not that far. You can see because this was taken at ISO 6400, just by trying to adjust some of these things, it starts to band and look really ugly and not so good. that's what happens if you don't take an image with lower ISO. You actually lose a lot of your dynamic range. Fun fact. Learned that the hard way. Okay, so I'm just going to try and cancel out a little bit of that orange. Sure. Something like that. It's not great. I'm not going to submit it for an award, but that's kind of how I would start, at least the general direction I would go. And of course, you can play along with all these other settings in here, add some denoise, add some sharpening, whatever works. But definitely you want to do a lot of localized adjustments rather than global ones because it's going to be so specific to each part of the image. Okay, we got a nice desert photo by an anonymous good person who uploaded their shot. I really like this. It's taken at high noon, but I think it kind of fits the aesthetic of the overall image, so I'm not actually going to complain about it. Normally I would. I'd say take your photo in golden hour when it's nicer outside. So you can see what an amazing thing the tone curve is. You literally grab a couple of sliders, put that S-curve on there, and then bam, you've added some nice pop to your image. Looks good. Okay, let's say that we want to do like a really vintagey Western theme. Well, we could warm it up a little bit. Let's add some texture. I'm going to take my clarity down, and that's going to make it feel a little bit more like an older camera. Could do the same thing with our dehaze and take that down a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to definitely clip my highlights, make them a little bit more creamy. Do the same thing with the shadows. Okay. Something like that. Go down here to our calibration, and we're just going to use this stylistically. We're going to add some magenta, kind of like a vintage Polaroid might feel. The greens we're going to just play with until they feel about right. They feel too mustardy. Somewhere around there. So here's before, and here's after. And then if we really want to go for it, let's add some grain. Take our vignette, make it a little bit darker, go over to our lens corrections, go to manual. We're just going to add some distortion as if it were taken with a non-digital camera with an older lens that actually didn't have lens corrections the way they do nowadays. We're going to constrain the crop and then add a little bit of vignette. Just like that. And with our detail, we could actually take our sharpening down, even add a little bit of noise reduction, and that's going to really smooth things out, make it a little bit more like a camera lens that just wasn't perfect, because that's how lenses were back then. Now, did I overdo it? I'm sure I did. So you could always dial it back here. See what you like. Here's before, and here's after. Depends what you like, right? If you want to go more clean, nice, vibrant, modern aesthetic, well, that's pretty easy too, right? Add your tone curve, maybe roll off your highlights just so it feels a little bit more creamy. Really crush those blacks if you want to, or do the opposite, make it feel vintagey. It's up to you. World's your oyster. Tag at Signature Edits Co. I would love to see what you come up with. All right, we've got the lone tree in the midst of the rainforest. All the other brothers and sisters of this tree were cut down to make room for cows, to make room for hamburgers. How's that for a story? Okay, so what I want to do, I really want to go with like a warm brown aesthetic. So we're going to start by just doing the basics. We're going to warm this up somewhere around there. And then I'm going to enhance the details of these green grass. Reset. Go over here to our add texture brush. And if you want to copy this, you can just pause the video, create your own preset, and go down here, save it. Current settings as preset. I'm actually going to hit this little triangle, and then we should be able to just increase the intensity of that overall brush. Something like that. Go back down. I'm going to try and make it a little bit brighter as well. Somewhere around there. Okay. And I might take the clarity back down because I think that was a little bit too much. Okay. Here's before. Here's after. Now, I don't really want the sky to be quite so mustardy and warm, so what I might need to do is actually back off on my white balance and then just add that color to our mask here. Somewhere around there. And if you want to go nuts, we can even duplicate that. Reset this whole panel, except for just use that for a second color. So we can add one color, which was the reddish orange, and then we'll add some yellowish green. Before, after. Okay, now I really want the focus of the photo to be this tree. So our second step is probably going to be just sharpening this tree up. A couple ways to do that. We could just paint on it, or we can see if we can use some lens corrections to help with that. It looks reasonably sharp, but I'm going to start by going down to our sharpening. Hello. Now, I love using the masking tool in the sharpening panel. Grab it, hold Alt, and it'll actually let you select how much of that image, how picky Lightroom is with what it sharpens and what it doesn't. So I'm just going to hold it until we mask out things like the sky. I only want it to sharpen the branches. And I'll take my sharpening way up, and I'm going to increase my radius and decrease and just play and see what feels right. So somewhere around there looks okay. Now let's go up to our lens corrections. Profile, make sure I turn those on. Good. That looks pretty good. I like it to pop a little bit more, so I'm just going to make a little brush here, reset everything. We're just going to add some texture and some contrast. Okay. And dial it back, because Ryan, you always take things too far, especially your jokes. Now I'm going to add a nice radial filter. We're going to darken everything down except for this tree, which allows me then to brighten the rest of the image back up. Now, this is not working very well because it's also brightening up the sky right behind the tree. So what I'm going to do is go to our range mask, set it to luminance, and hopefully I'll be able to just mask out the tree. So we're going to hit show luminance mask. It'll show me what's being masked and what's not. Definitely don't want it to mask the brightest parts of the image, aka the sky. Or actually the opposite. Let's have it just focus on the sky, so we'll set it to the bright parts of the image. Better way is going to be just painting the whole thing rather than the radial mask. Try this again. Range mask, luminance, set it to just the brightest parts. Okay. And actually by increasing the exposure and then kind of softening it by taking the texture and the clarity down, I think that actually makes it pop a little bit better. So here's without that, and here's with. Kind of subtle, but I feel like it's making a difference for me. So I'm going to roll with it. And then we're just going to darken down our lovely grass situation over here. Fun fact, if you hold down Shift while you're adjusting your brush, it will actually adjust the amount of feather. Just so you know. Okay, I feel like I'm spending so much time on an image that is just fighting me a little bit. I'm not liking how the top of this is looking kind of, what's the word? Almost like there's a lens flare going on and I'm losing contrast. So I could just try painting right here. Add some dehaze. Here's before. Here's after. We're going to roll with it. Say that's done. I'd love to see what you come up with. Okay, we got another beautiful shot by Elton Botel Photos. Elton, you're crushing it, my man. We're going to brighten this up. Let's do like a bright and airy. So I'm going to intentionally overexpose it. Roll back on the whites. Do the old S-curve. There, bright and airy. Just kidding. Okay, we're going to keep going here. So I'm going to grab my highlights, take them down a bit, shadows up a little bit, whites down, blacks up. And actually, I want my blacks to continue to have some contrast. So do one of those. And then play with our HSL panel. Take our greens and our yellows down a little bit. Adjust the hue. Depends what you're going for. Let's go this way this time. Okay, I'm going to take the luminance of those greens way up. We're going to kind of go for a pastel feel. So there's two ways to do it, right? We could take the greens and try and make them really dark, and that'll make our subject pop because she's bright and the rest is dark. Or we can go the other way and really try and blow out the greens and the blues, and that will make our subject stand out because she's dark and got lots of contrast, and the surrounding area does not. So here's before, here's after. Just one take on it. Of course, there's a million different things we could do. We could kind of try and make this a little bit more cohesive by then adding a little bit of color grading on top of everything. Something like that. And the shadows, I don't even know what color to use in the shadows. Maybe nothing. I'm thinking nothing. But we could make the shadows a little bit darker maybe. Highlights a little brighter. There. Before. After. Do you like it? I don't know. I think it's okay. Let's keep going. Here's another one. I actually love this shot. I love it because the light is so good. It's really soft. It's really beautiful. And it's just going to be fun to edit. These kind of images are so easy because literally you could just grab that, grab some contrast, adjust your white balance the way you like it, and life is good. Like when you have a well-lit image, life is just so much better. Anyways, well done to whoever took this photo. And thank you for sharing. We're going to go down here to our calibration. Just going to adjust the reds to try and get the skin tones a little bit nicer. Before, after. See how we got rid of that yellow cast? Which is really what the calibration panel is meant to do. Fix colors rather than stylistically. Most of the time we use it stylistically, but that's not what it was designed for. Fun fact. Okay, so we're going to make a little bit of an S-curve here. Something like that. We could warm it up a little bit. Now, I don't really know what my vision is for this photo, to be honest. And I probably should have come up with something before I started this tutorial. But here we are, people. Here we are, just making the best of it. What do I want to do? Well, first off, let's go ahead and grab a radial filter. We're just going to slightly place a focus onto our subject. So I'm going to invert it by hitting the apostrophe key. Hit O to see your mask if you ever need to know which way it's inverted. And then I'm going to just grab our contrast, bring it down. And grab our whites, bring them up a little bit. Grab our highlights, bring them down. So what I'm doing is I'm essentially lowering the contrast on her skin and also brightening her up a little bit. So you're going to see if I delete this mask before and after, we've really smoothed things out. We've also made her a little bit brighter in the frame, which just makes her stand out a little bit more. Next, let's just do some overall adjustments here. Add a little bit more pop to our image. Maybe pull the midtones down a bit and the shadows down a bit. Maybe. Good. I'm going to add a little bit of dehaze, a little bit of texture. Good. Somewhere around there. Now, I really do want to make this image nice and warm, but I don't want her skin tone to look really weird. And that's what's going to happen if I actually grab my white balance and take it up way too much. It's just going to make her skin look strange. So I'm going to start by actually attacking these shadows. So we're going to head down to our color grading and see if just by actually grabbing some orange and some yellows, adding those to the shadows, if we can get away with warming them up. Now you're going to see that it's really picking up on her hair and the shadows on our subject. So it's not super great. I'm going to just leave it right there. Pretty subtle. Here's before, here's after. Other way to do it, let's grab our saturation, take it out of the blues. Here's before, here's after. So you can see how we've just kind of added a little bit more cohesiveness to the image by making it more warm overall. We don't have the blue fighting with us for our attention anymore. Then we can grab the hue of the blues, maybe take it a little bit more towards cyan. Good, good, good. And we could maybe even add a fake sun flare. So to do that, we're just going to reset this mask, hold Alt, reset, grab a big radial filter and put it off screen. Now we're going to grab our exposure, bring it up, invert it so it's inside of this filter. Take our contrast down, highlights up, shadows up, whites down, blacks up. Basically, I am just getting rid of contrast and adding some haze to the image, to the radial filter. And then I'm going to grab my white balance, bring it all the way up, maybe a little bit of magenta and a little bit of color overlay. Okay, now you see I have a nice mobile sun that I can click and drag. So I'll take it, move it over here, something like that. And of course, that's really intense, so I'm just going to dial the exposure back. play around until I kind of get it the way that I actually like it. I don't want it to be too extreme, just a subtle little thing. Something like that. So here's before and here's after. Just adds a little interest to the shot. Now let's go ahead and add some sharpening to our subject. For some reason, she's not super sharp, so we can grab another adjustment layer. I don't need to sharpen everything, but we'll just add a little bit of texture, a little bit of sharpness, drop our contrast even more. And a little bit of clarity, maybe. Good. And then I'm going to just enhance the detail on these jeans a little bit. Contrast up, little texture, a little dehaze. Even darken them down a bit. Yeah, maybe not. Okay, so here's before and here's after. Now we could add some overall warmth to the image by doing that overlay trick. Grab a radial filter, and then we can add whatever color we want on top of everything. I'm thinking kind of like a peachy orange, like that. And we're just going to dial it back. Somewhere around there. Here's without that, and here's with. So here's before, here's after. I probably went a little bit too far on the peach, but whatever. We'll just leave it for now and move on to our next image. Okay, I lied. It's too much. It's bugging me. Good. So whatever you come up with, tag @SignatureEditsCo. I would love to see what you create from this. Couple more. So this one, we got a nice indoor shot, really nice warm light, so the skin tones look pretty good. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I want to keep this channel family friendly, and I don't know if this image falls under that category, so I'm not going to do anything super fancy. We're just going to add a little bit more pop, like that, go down to our calibration, and we're just going to slightly adjust so that our skin tones just feel a little bit closer to where they should naturally be. They're just a little bit yellowy green. So I think that's slightly closer, maybe a little too far. Good. And you could do a million different things for this particular photo. We're just going to worry about these hot spots on our skin. Pull them back a little bit. Easiest way, just take the contrast down. That'll blend it a little bit. You can even take the texture and the clarity down. That sometimes helps too. Before, after. Nothing fancy. I'm going to move on though. Okay, this one I'm loving. We're just going to adjust our white balance somewhere around there. And you can see because there's so much green going on, her skin tone, very green. So let's try and just get that right with the white balance. Around there is as far as we can push it. It also looks like she might be out of focus. Okay, so let's try and fix that first. We're going to just take our texture brush, take it up. Okay, so we might have some issues here, people. Looks like the focus was maybe just in front of her. Or if we look at our settings, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why it's not sharp. But we can fix this. Let's go to our sharpening panel. It's close enough that we should be okay. Add some masking so we're not sharpening everything. Take that up. Okay, here's before and here's after. I don't know if you can actually see that in the YouTube version of this because it kind of gets compressed, but it looks a lot better. And then I can grab one more brush. Just add a little bit of selective sharpening on her face. Okay, so let's grab our contrast, bring it back down. Highlights down, shadows up, just because it looks like our light is actually pretty harsh. So I'm going to try and flatten things out. Then I'm going to add some contrast back in selectively using this tone curve. There's something about this that just feels really weird. Okay, I'm gonna brush right on her face again. Take the contrast down and the shadows down a little bit. What's that gonna do? It's gonna smooth out those hot spots on her skin, hopefully a little bit, while holding on to the contrast. So here's before and here's after so far. Now we can selectively add some contrast back in, and let's go for kind of a more desaturated look in the greens here, but also get them nice and warm. Good. And let's use a color mask. We're going to grab an adjustment brush like this, go to our range mask, select color, use the dropper tool, and select this green. So now if I press O, it's just masking that color of green on here. What's cool about that then is I can warm the greens up or cool them down, do whatever I want to. We can make them Kool-Aid. I'm just going to warm them up in this case. And we can even add an overlay to whatever color we're going for. Unfortunately, I have no idea what color I'm going for. I'm thinking somewhere around there. So here's before, and here's after. Just warmed them up a bit. Okay, next, the old radial filter. Place it on our subject. Contrast down. Whites up a little bit. We could keep it that way, or we could invert it and do the opposite and make everything dark around her, but I think that actually kind of works. Somewhere around there. And then the rest is just up to you. What do you want to do? We could do some other stylistic stuff. We could definitely brush on her skin. Let's do a little skin brushing. What am I going to do with this brush? Well, I'm going to try and even out her skin tone. Just because you see some parts of the skin, it looks really saturated, some it looks really blown out. So essentially, the parts that don't need to have detail, I can brush over, take the contrast down, take the texture down a little bit, take the clarity down, and it'll smooth that out. So here's before, here's after. Just feels softer. Okay, here's our before image, here's our after image. Do I love it? I don't know. I haven't decided. Let's see what you post at Signature Edits Co on Instagram, and I'd love to check it out. All right, one last image. Let's fix this white balance. We're feeling really green, so we'll come down here to our greens. Just adjust that. Take our saturation down. See what a massive difference that made before and after. Play with it till we get it right. And sometimes playing with the blue primary can really make things cool. Okay, I'm going to go for a more natural edit here, so I'm not trying to like make any massive changes. I want to keep it kind of close to what reality would be. So here's before so far, and after we've just warmed it up, brought out some more magenta. I'm going to add some pop. Not that much pop. I'm going to raise the luminance on her skin a little bit, darken down the greens a little, and you guessed it, desaturate the yellows just a bit. Somewhere around there. Okay, now a couple last steps. I am going to add some texture. So we'll add contrast, texture, clarity, dehaze, shadows down a little bit, highlights up. I'm going to paint on her hair just to really enhance that detail. And the parts of her that I want to enhance the texture, so maybe the dress, her lips, eyes, eyebrows, here's before that and after. And then we're going to make another brush to smooth out the parts of her skin that don't need texture added. Contrast down, highlights down, texture, clarity, little bit of dehaze down, a little sharpness down. Then we're just going to brush on her shoulder here, on her neck. You're going to see it just smooths out the skin. And of course, if we want to be real experts, we could zoom in, take our time with this. So you see, here's before and here's after. Really smooth things out. Now, it might be a little bit too bright, so we'll darken it just a bit. Before, after. Sound good? Okay. And then it looks like she has a birthmark on her shoulder. Now, if this were a client and not a model, I would probably leave this unless she requested it to be removed. However, since we're going to assume that this is a model and we shot this shoot for, I don't know, this dress company, and they don't want the birthmark, pretty simple to take care of like that. Good. Now she might still look a little bit too airbrushed here, so we could kind of play around. Okay, so here's before and here's after. I think maybe a little bit more saturation in the greens would be good. And even a little more luminance maybe in the yellows, just to make that image pop a little bit more. So here's before. After. Pretty quick, pretty simple, but reasonably effective. So that's it for this week. We've gone through all of the raw files. I would love to see what you guys have created. Make sure to tag @SignatureEditsCo. Show me what you got. Was this video helpful? If it was, do me a big favor. Can you hit that thumbs up button and make sure to subscribe? Grab some free presets in the description below if you want. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Create something awesome. Peace.